Sarah Martinez stepped into the bright fluorescent lights of the downtown gym for the first time in 3 years. The smell of rubber mats and cleaning supplies hit her nose as she clutched her brand new gym bag. At 32, she felt completely out of place among the muscular regulars who moved between machines like they owned the space. "First time here?" asked Marcus, the gym trainer, noticing her hesitation near the entrance. Sarah nodded, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Yeah, I'm pretty much starting from zero." What Marcus and everyone else in that gym couldn't see was the collection of hospital bracelets Sarah kept hidden in her jewelry box at home. 5 white plastic bands that told a story of survival she never shared with anyone. The first bracelet came from when she was 19. Sarah had been a college sophomore, studying late in the library when she felt dizzy. She ignored it, thinking she just needed coffee. But, when she stood up to leave, the world spun violently. She collapsed between the history and philosophy sections, her head hitting the corner of a metal shelf. She woke up in the emergency room with 7 stitches and a doctor explaining that her blood pressure had dropped dangerously low. "Severe dehydration and malnutrition," the doctor said, shaking his head. "When's the last time you ate a proper meal?" Sarah couldn't remember. Between working 2 part-time jobs and carrying 18 credit hours, food had become an afterthought. She lived on energy drinks and whatever free samples she could find around campus. "You could have died," the doctor continued. "Your body was literally shutting down." But Sarah was young and felt invincible. She thanked the doctor, promised to eat better, and threw the hospital bracelet in a drawer when she got home. Within a week, she was back to her old habits. Now, 13 years later, standing in this gym, Sarah touched her wrist where those bracelets once sat. Nobody here knew about the second time death had knocked on her door. The second bracelet came 3 years after the first one. Sarah had graduated college and landed her first real job at a marketing firm. The stress was intense, but she loved the challenge. She worked 60-hour weeks, survived on takeout and coffee, and barely slept. One Tuesday morning, she was presenting to a major client when she felt that familiar dizziness. But this time was different. This time, her chest felt like someone was sitting on it. She couldn't catch her breath. "Excuse me," she managed to whisper before stumbling out of the conference room. Her colleague Jenny found her collapsed in the hallway, unconscious and barely breathing. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but those minutes felt like hours to Jenny, who performed CPR until the paramedics took over. "Heart attack," the emergency room doctor announced. At 22 years old. Sarah's parents flew in from Phoenix, crying and confused. How could their healthy daughter have a heart attack? The cardiologist explained that extreme stress, poor diet, and lack of sleep had put dangerous strain on her young heart. "You're lucky," he said. "A few more minutes without oxygen and we would have lost you." The second white bracelet joined the first one in Sarah's drawer. She took a week off work, ate some vegetables, and convinced herself it was just a fluke. Marcus handed Sarah a clipboard with forms to fill out. "Any medical conditions we should know about?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. On paper, she was perfectly healthy now. Regular checkups showed normal blood pressure, good cholesterol, and a strong heart. But those 5 bracelets told a different story. "No," she lied. "Nothing serious." The third near-death experience happened when Sarah was 26. She had switched to a less stressful job at a non-profit organization and thought she had learned her lesson about taking care of herself. But stress found new ways to creep into her life. Her younger brother David was deployed overseas with the military, and Sarah worried about him constantly. She stopped sleeping well, checking her phone obsessively for news updates or messages from him. She lost weight from anxiety and started having panic attacks. One night, Sarah woke up feeling like she was drowning. Her throat was closing up, and she couldn't breathe. She stumbled to the bathroom mirror and saw her lips turning blue. This time, she was smart enough to call 911 herself. "Severe allergic reaction," the ER doctor diagnosed. "But we can't figure out what caused it." "Have you eaten anything different? New medications? New soap or detergent?" Sarah shook her head to everything. It wasn't until later that they discovered the truth. Extreme stress and anxiety had triggered something called stress-induced anaphylaxis. Her body was literally allergic to her own emotional state. It's rare, the allergist explained a week later. But chronic stress can make your immune system attack itself. Your body went into complete shutdown mode. The third bracelet went into the drawer with the others. Sarah started seeing a therapist and learned some meditation techniques. For a while, things got better. Now, filling out the gym paperwork, Sarah remembered how naive she had been to think she was safe. The fourth bracelet came just 2 years ago, when Sarah was 30. She had met Tom, a wonderful man who made her laugh and feel secure. They got engaged, and Sarah threw herself into wedding planning with the same intensity she brought to everything else. She wanted the perfect dress, the perfect venue, the perfect flowers. She worked overtime to pay for extras, stayed up late addressing invitations by hand, and barely ate because stress killed her appetite. The morning of her final dress fitting, Sarah fainted in the bridal shop. When she came to, she was surrounded by worried faces and someone was calling an ambulance. Extremely low blood sugar, the paramedic explained. When's the last time you ate? Sarah tried to remember. She had been surviving on coffee and wedding adrenaline for weeks. At the hospital, the doctor ran tests and discovered that Sarah's blood sugar had dropped so low that she was minutes away from diabetic coma. The strange thing was, Sarah wasn't diabetic. Her body was just completely depleted. Starvation does this, the doctor explained to Tom, who looked terrified. Her body was literally consuming itself to survive. Tom held her hand as they put in N4 and slowly brought her blood sugar back to normal levels. "Why didn't you tell me you weren't eating?" he asked. Sarah couldn't explain it. She had been so focused on making everything perfect that she had forgotten to take care of the most basic thing, feeding herself. The fourth bracelet joined the collection. Tom insisted on moving the wedding date back so Sarah could recover properly. They had a beautiful, simple ceremony 3 months later, and Sarah promised herself this was the last time she would end up in a hospital. But promises are hard to keep when you don't understand the deeper problem. Marcus showed Sarah around the gym, pointing out the different areas. "We have cardio machines over here, weight training in the back, and group fitness classes upstairs. What are you most interested in?" "I just want to get healthy," Sarah said, and she meant it. What she didn't tell Marcus was about the fifth and most recent bracelet, the one that had finally scared her into taking real action. 6 months ago, Sarah had been working late again. Tom was out of town on business, and she had decided to tackle a major project that was due the following week. She ordered Chinese takeout and settled in for a long night. Around midnight, she started feeling nauseous. She assumed it was the MSG in the food or maybe just exhaustion. But the nausea got worse, and she started throwing up. By 2 a.m., she was throwing up blood. This time, she didn't hesitate to call 911. Something was very wrong. Bleeding ulcer, the gastroenterologist announced after running tests. Severe perforation. "We need to operate immediately." Sarah's stomach lining had literally developed holes from stress and poor eating habits. The acid in her stomach was eating through the protective barrier, causing internal bleeding. If you had waited until morning, the surgeon told Tom after the operation, she would have bled to death internally. The fifth bracelet was different from the others. This one came with a longer hospital stay, a strict recovery diet, and a stern lecture from her doctor about lifestyle changes. "You're 32 years old," Dr. Chen had said. "You've been incredibly lucky 5 times. Luck runs out." That conversation had led Sarah to this gym 6 months later. She was finally ready to admit that she needed help. Marcus handed her a guest pass and started explaining the payment options. "We have personal training packages if you're interested. Might be good for someone just getting back into fitness." Sarah nodded, watching other gym members move confidently between exercises. They all looked so strong and capable. She wondered if any of them had ever felt as fragile as she did. An older woman on a treadmill caught her attention. She was probably in her 60s, walking at a steady pace and reading a magazine. She looked peaceful and healthy. Sarah wondered what her story was. A young guy was doing pull-ups nearby, making it look effortless. His muscles moved smoothly, and he breathed steadily. Sarah remembered when walking up 2 flights of stairs left her winded. The key is to start slow, Marcus continued. A lot of people come in here thinking they need to make up for lost time immediately. That's usually when injuries happen. Sarah appreciated the advice, even though Marcus couldn't know how literally true it was for her. She really was trying to make up for lost time, time she had almost run out of completely. What kind of goals are you thinking about? Marcus asked. Sarah considered the question. 6 months ago, her only goal had been survival. The surgery had been successful, but recovery had been slow and painful. For weeks, she could barely eat solid food without discomfort. I want to be strong, she said finally. Not just physically, but I want to feel like my body is working with me instead of against me. Marcus smiled. That's a great goal. Very achievable with consistency and patience. If only he knew how much patience Sarah had already needed just to get this far. The morning after her surgery, lying in the hospital bed with tubes in her arm and strict orders not to move, Sarah had made herself a promise. If she survived this 5th brush with death, she would finally take her health seriously. Not just eating better or getting more sleep, but really understanding why she kept pushing herself to dangerous extremes. Why did stress make her forget to eat? Why did she always prioritize everything else over her own basic needs? The therapist she started seeing helped her understand some of it. Sarah was a perfectionist who had learned to associate her worth with her productivity. Taking care of herself felt selfish when there were always more important things to do. You can't pour from an empty cup, Dr. Rodriguez had told her. You've been running on empty for so long that your body started breaking down. The therapy sessions were hard work, but they helped Sarah see the pattern. Every time she had nearly died, she had been in a period of extreme stress where she had stopped taking care of her basic needs. Now, standing in this gym, Sarah felt like she was finally ready to break that pattern. Marcus gave her a tour of the locker rooms and explained the gym rules. Most important thing is to listen to your body, he said. Pain is your body's way of telling you something's wrong. Sarah almost laughed at the irony. Her body had been screaming at her for 13 years, and she had only recently learned to listen. When would you like to start? Marcus asked. Today, Sarah said without hesitation. If that's okay. Absolutely. Let me introduce you to one of our trainers who specializes in working with beginners. As they walked across the gym floor, Sarah caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. She looked nervous but determined. For the first time in years, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of just trying to survive. The trainer Marcus introduced her to was named Lisa, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm energy. Tell me a little about your fitness background, Lisa said as they sat down in a quiet corner. Sarah thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated, but she was tired of hiding it. I'm starting completely over, Sarah said. I've learned the hard way that I can't keep ignoring my health. Lisa nodded. A lot of people come to that realization at some point. The important thing is that you're here now. They spent the next 30 minutes talking about Sarah's goals and creating a basic plan. Nothing too ambitious, 20 minutes of walking on the treadmill 3 times a week, some basic stretching, and gradually adding strength training. The most important thing is building the habit, Lisa explained. We can always increase intensity later. Sarah appreciated the gentle approach. She had spent so many years in crisis mode that the idea of gradual progress felt revolutionary. As she changed into her workout clothes in the locker room, Sarah thought about the 5 hospital bracelets sitting in her jewelry box at home. She had kept them as reminders, though she wasn't sure of what exactly. Maybe they were reminders of how close she had come to losing everything. Or maybe they were proof that she was stronger than she thought. Either way, they had led her to this moment. Sarah stepped onto the treadmill and started walking slowly. Around her, the gym hummed with activity. People lifting weights, running, stretching, all taking care of their bodies in different ways. Nobody looked at her like she was a beginner who didn't belong. Nobody could see the scars from her surgery or know about the times she had almost died. All they could see was someone taking a positive step. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like that was enough. 3 weeks into her gym routine, Sarah was starting to feel like maybe she could do this. Her body was responding well to the gentle exercise, and she hadn't had any of the stomach pain that had plagued her since the surgery. She was walking on the treadmill when she noticed him watching her. Jake was one of the gym regulars, probably in his mid-20s, with the kind of muscular build that suggested he had been working out seriously for years. Sarah had seen him around but had never paid much attention until she noticed his eyes following her. At first, she thought maybe she was doing something wrong. Was she walking too slowly? Using the machine incorrectly? But when she caught his eye, he smiled and gave her a thumbs up. "Good job staying consistent," he said when she stepped off the treadmill. "I've seen you here every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for 3 weeks. That's better than most people." Sarah felt a flush of pride. She hadn't realized anyone was paying attention to her progress. "Thanks," she said. "I'm still pretty new to all this." "We all start somewhere," Jake replied. "Mind if I ask what got you started?" Sarah hesitated. She had gotten good at deflecting personal questions, but something about Jake's genuine interest made her want to share a little. "I had some health issues," she said carefully. "My doctor recommended regular exercise." Jake nodded sympathetically. "That's rough. But you're doing great. A lot of people get intimidated and give up after a week." If only he knew how many times she had almost given up on everything, Sarah thought. What Jake couldn't see was the conversation Sarah had with her therapist just 2 days earlier. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Sarah had told Dr. Rodriguez during their session. "Like maybe this time I'm actually taking care of myself, but something bad is still going to happen." What would the bad thing be? Dr. Rodriguez had asked. Sarah thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe I'll get sick again. Maybe I'll fall back into old patterns. Maybe I'm not actually as healthy as I think I am." "Those are understandable fears given your history," Dr. Rodriguez said. "But let me ask you something. What evidence do you have right now that something bad is going to happen?" Sarah had to admit she didn't have any evidence. She was eating regular meals, sleeping better than she had in years, and actually enjoying the physical activity. Her follow-up appointment with Dr. Chen had shown that her stomach was healing well. "Sometimes," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "we become so used to crisis that peace feels dangerous. Like if we're not worried about something, we're not being responsible." That insight had stuck with Sarah. She realized she had spent so much of her adult life in survival mode that she didn't quite know how to live in maintenance mode. Now, talking to Jake at the gym, she felt that familiar urge to minimize her progress or find something to worry about. Instead, she made a conscious effort to just accept his compliment. "Thank you," she said. "It feels good to be here. If you ever want a workout partner or need help with the weight machines, let me know," Jake offered. "I've been training for about 6 years, so I know my way around." Sarah thanked him and headed to the stretching area, where Lisa was waiting for their weekly check-in. "You look more relaxed today," Lisa observed as they went through some basic stretches. "I feel more relaxed," Sarah admitted. "For the first time in a while, I feel like my body and I are on the same team." Lisa smiled. "That's a beautiful way to put it. How has your energy been?" "Much better. I'm sleeping through the night now, and I don't feel exhausted all the time." What Sarah didn't mention was how revolutionary it felt to wake up each morning without immediately checking her body for warning signs. For years, her first conscious thought each day had been a mental scan: stomach pain, chest tightness, dizziness, nausea. The habit had developed after the second hospitalization, when she had become hyper-aware of every physical sensation. The problem was that constant anxiety about her health had actually made her feel worse, not better. "Your posture has improved too," Lisa noted. You're standing taller, walking with more confidence. Sarah hadn't noticed, but when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she could see what Lisa meant. She wasn't hunched over like she was protecting herself from attack. Ready to try some lightweight training next week? Lisa asked. Sarah felt a flicker of the old anxiety. Weight training sounded serious, like something that could go wrong. But she reminded herself that Lisa was a professional who understood how to progress safely. Yes, she said. I think I'm ready. After the gym, Sarah stopped by the grocery store to pick up ingredients for the healthy meal plan Tom had helped her create. It was still strange to her how much planning went into eating well. For most of her adult life, food had been whatever was convenient, cheap, or available when she finally remembered she was hungry. The idea of planning meals ahead of time, making sure she had protein and vegetables and complex carbohydrates, had seemed overwhelming at first. But Tom had been patient and supportive, learning to cook alongside her and making sure their kitchen was stocked with healthy options. "How was the gym?" he asked when she got home, looking up from his laptop where he was working on a presentation. "Good." Jake, one of the regulars, complimented me on being consistent. "And Lisa wants to start adding weight training next week." Tom smiled. "That's great. You should be proud of yourself." Sarah was learning to accept praise instead of deflecting it. 6 months ago, if someone had complimented her consistency, she would have downplayed it or found reasons why it wasn't really an accomplishment. The truth was, consistency had never been Sarah's strong suit when it came to self-care. She was incredibly consistent at work, with friendships, with taking care of other people. But taking care of herself had always felt optional, something she would get around to when everything else was handled. "Want to help me prep vegetables for this week?" Sarah asked. They spent the evening chopping vegetables and portioning out healthy snacks, something that had become a Sunday routine. It was meditative work, and Sarah found she enjoyed the planning aspect. "Remember when you lived on energy drinks and takeout?" Tom asked, carefully slicing bell peppers. "Don't remind me," Sarah said, though she was smiling. "I can't believe my body functioned at all on that diet." The truth was, her body hadn't functioned well on that diet. Each of her 5 hospitalizations had been related, at least partially, to her poor eating habits. But, at the time, she hadn't seen the connection. "What's different now?" Tom asked. "What makes it easier to take care of yourself?" Sarah considered the question as she washed carrots. "I think before, I saw taking care of myself as selfish. Like time and energy I spent on myself was time and energy taken away from more important things. And now? Now I understand that if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of anything else. It's not selfish, it's necessary." The shift in perspective had been gradual, built through months of therapy and the sobering reality of nearly dying 5 times. But it was also practical. Sarah had learned that when she ate regular meals, she had more energy for work. When she slept well, she was more patient and creative. When she exercised, her stress levels were more manageable. Taking care of herself wasn't taking away from her ability to be productive and helpful, it was enhancing it. That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking about the conversation with Jake at the gym. She realized it was the first time in years that someone had noticed her efforts and she had felt proud instead of embarrassed. For so long, any attention on her health had been crisis-driven. Doctors, nurses, concerned friends and family members all focused on what was wrong and what needed to be fixed. Jake's recognition had been different. He had noticed her showing up, being consistent, making progress. He had seen her as someone who was succeeding, not someone who was failing. Sarah thought about the 5 hospital bracelets in her jewelry box. She had kept them as reminders, but maybe it was time to think about what they really represented. The first bracelet, from when she was 19, represented a wake-up call she had ignored. The second, from the heart attack at 22, was a warning she had minimized. The third, from the stress-induced allergic reaction, had taught her that mental and physical health were connected. The fourth, from the blood sugar crisis, had shown her that wedding stress could literally be life-threatening. And, the fifth, from the bleeding ulcer, had finally scared her into real change. Each bracelet represented a failure to listen to her body, but also a survival. Each one was proof that she was stronger than she realized, even when she was making choices that could have killed her. Maybe it was time to see them as symbols of resilience rather than reminders of near disasters. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling rested and energetic. She had a healthy breakfast, kissed Tom goodbye, and headed to work with her gym bag in the car for her afternoon workout. At work, her colleague Emma noticed her good mood. "You seem really happy lately," Emma observed during their coffee break. "What's different?" Sarah thought about how to explain it. "I've been taking better care of myself. Going to the gym, eating better, getting enough sleep." It sounds simple, but it's made a huge difference. "That's great," Emma said. "I keep meaning to start exercising, but I can never find the time." Sarah understood that feeling completely. "I used to think I didn't have time either. But then, I realized I was spending a lot of time feeling sick and exhausted, which was way less efficient than spending time staying healthy." It was true. Sarah estimated that over the years, she had lost weeks of productivity to illness, fatigue, and recovery from her various health crises. The time she now spent at the gym and preparing healthy food was an investment that paid dividends in energy and focus. "Maybe I should start small," Emma mused. "Just walking or something." "Walking is perfect," Sarah encouraged. "That's exactly how I started." That afternoon at the gym, Sarah felt a new confidence as she walked through the doors. She nodded to Marcus at the front desk, waved to Jake who was doing squats, and headed to her usual treadmill. As she warmed up, Sarah watched the other gym members with curiosity rather than intimidation. The older woman who was always reading on the treadmill, the young guy who made pull-ups look easy, the group of friends who took a yoga class together. Everyone here had their own story, their own reasons for prioritizing their health. Some of them had probably had health scares like she had. Others were maybe just maintaining good habits they had developed years ago. Sarah realized she no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She was part of this community of people who showed up for themselves. Lisa approached as Sarah finished her cardio workout. "Ready to try some light weights today?" Sarah felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, but also excitement. "Yes, let's do it." They started with basic movements using very light dumbbells, bicep curls, shoulder presses, chest presses. Lisa demonstrated each exercise slowly and watched Sarah's form carefully. "How does that feel?" Lisa asked after Sarah completed her first set of bicep curls. "Good," Sarah said, surprised. "Easier than I thought it would be." "Your body is stronger than you think," Lisa said. "We're just teaching it how to use that strength safely." The comment struck Sarah as profound. Her body was stronger than she thought. It had survived 5 near-death experiences, major surgery, years of neglect, and was now responding beautifully to proper care. Maybe she had been underestimating her physical resilience the same way she had been underestimating her emotional resilience. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they moved to the next exercise. "Of course. Do you ever work with people who have had serious health problems? Like people who are starting over after being sick?" Lisa nodded. "Quite a few, actually. People recovering from heart attacks, cancer treatment, major surgeries. Often they're the most motivated clients I work with because they understand how precious their health is." "Do they ever worry about pushing too hard? Or not being able to tell the difference between good pain and bad pain?" "All the time," Lisa said. "It's natural to be cautious when your body has let you down before. But usually what I see is that people are more in tune with their bodies after a health scare, not less." Sarah considered this. She had definitely become more aware of physical sensations since her surgeries and hospitalizations. Maybe that hyper-awareness could be an advantage rather than a liability. "The key is learning to trust your body again," Lisa continued. "And that happens gradually, with consistent positive experiences." After the workout, Sarah felt energized and accomplished. The weight training hadn't been scary or dangerous, it had been empowering. She was putting her equipment away when Jake approached. "Hey, I saw you trying out the weights. How did it feel?" "Really good," Sarah said honestly. "I was nervous, but Lisa made sure I started slow." "Lisa's great. She helped me when I was recovering from a shoulder injury a few years ago." Sarah was surprised. Jake had always seemed so naturally athletic to her. "Really? You had an injury?" "Tore my rotator cuff playing baseball in college. I thought my lifting days were over, but Lisa taught me how to work around it and eventually strengthen it. Now it's actually stronger than my good shoulder." This revelation shifted something in Sarah's perspective. Even the people who seemed naturally strong and healthy had their own struggles and setbacks. Jake's confident gym presence was built on recovery and careful rehabilitation, just like hers was. "Thanks for telling me that," Sarah said. "It helps to know that setbacks don't have to be permanent." "Definitely not," Jake agreed. "Sometimes they're actually opportunities to build something better." As Sarah drove home, she thought about Jake's words. Maybe her 5 brushes with death hadn't just been close calls, maybe they had been opportunities to build something better. Each health crisis had taught her something important about her body and her limits. The collective impact had finally motivated her to make real, lasting changes. Without those wake-up calls, she might have continued her pattern of neglect indefinitely. The crises had been scary and dangerous, but they had also been transformative. Sarah realized she was no longer ashamed of her medical history. Instead, she was starting to see it as part of what made her strong. 6 months after starting at the gym, Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror. Not just physically, though she was definitely stronger and more toned than she had been in years. The bigger change was in her eyes. They held a confidence and peace she hadn't seen since her teenage years. She was setting up for her workout when a new member approached her hesitantly. "Excuse me," the woman said, "I'm really new here and feeling pretty overwhelmed." "You seem like you know what you're doing. Any advice?" Sarah almost laughed out loud. 6 months ago, she had been that overwhelmed newcomer. Now someone was seeing her as the experienced one. "I'm actually not that experienced myself," Sarah said kindly. "But I'd be happy to share what I've learned. The most important thing is to start slow and listen to your body." The woman, who introduced herself as Patricia, looked to be in her 40s and seemed genuinely nervous about being in the gym. "I had a minor heart attack 3 months ago," Patricia confided quietly. "My doctor says exercise will help prevent another one, but I'm terrified of pushing too hard." Sarah felt her heart clench with recognition and compassion. "I understand that fear completely. Have you talked to any of the trainers here? They're really good at helping people with medical concerns." As she helped Patricia get oriented, Sarah found herself sharing some of her own experience. "I had some serious health problems too," she said. "It took me a while to trust my body again. But starting here was one of the best decisions I ever made." What Sarah didn't tell Patricia was about the conversation she'd had with Dr. Chen the previous week. "Your latest tests are remarkable," Dr. Chen had said, reviewing Sarah's 6-month follow-up results. "Your stomach lining has completely healed, your blood pressure is perfect, and your overall health markers are the best I've seen from you." "So I'm really okay?" Sarah had asked, still struggling to believe it. "You're more than okay. You're thriving. Whatever changes you've made, keep doing them." The validation from Dr. Chen had been incredible, but what meant even more was how Sarah felt day to day. She woke up energetic instead of exhausted. She could climb stairs without getting winded. Most importantly, she no longer lived in constant fear of the next health crisis. "The key is building up gradually," Sarah told Patricia. "I started with just 20 minutes of walking 3 times a week. Now I'm doing an hour of mixed cardio and weights 4 times a week, and it feels natural." Patricia seemed encouraged. "Thank you for being so honest. Everyone else here looks like they've never had a sick day in their life." Sarah smiled. "Trust me, most people have more going on than you can see." We're all just doing our best. After helping Patricia get started on a treadmill, Sarah moved on to her own workout. She was scheduled to work with Lisa on some advanced strength training, something that would have terrified her 6 months ago. Ready to try deadlifts today? Lisa asked. Sarah felt a moment of nervousness, but it was excitement more than fear. Let's do it. Lisa walked her through the proper form with just the empty barbell first, emphasizing the importance of protecting her back and core. When Sarah was ready, they added small weights and practiced the movement slowly. This is actually helping my posture, Sarah noticed after a few repetitions. That's exactly right, Lisa said. Deadlifts are one of the best exercises for overall strength and stability. As they worked, Sarah thought about how much her relationship with physical challenge had changed. 6 months ago, any kind of physical stress felt dangerous because she associated it with the times her body had failed her. Now she was learning to distinguish between the good stress of challenging her muscles and the bad stress that came from neglecting her health. Her body was giving her clear, reliable feedback about what helped and what hurt. You've come so far, Lisa observed as they finished the set. Remember when you were nervous about increasing the incline on the treadmill? Sarah did remember. Every small progression had felt risky at first. But each success had built her confidence for the next challenge. I think I was scared of my own body for a while, Sarah said. Like it was unpredictable and might betray me at any moment. And now I feel like we're partners working toward the same goal. The partnership metaphor felt right to Sarah. Instead of her mind pushing her body to dangerous extremes, they were collaborating. Her body gave her feedback, and she listened and responded appropriately. After her workout, Sarah was stretching in the cool-down area when Jake joined her. I have to tell you something, he said. When I first saw you here 6 months ago, I was worried about you. Sarah was surprised. Worried how? You looked so fragile and uncertain. Like you were afraid you might break. I've seen people like that before, usually they're recovering from something serious and they don't stick around long. What changed your mind? Jake thought about it. You kept showing up, even when you looked scared. And, gradually you started looking less like someone who was afraid of exercise and more like someone who was embracing it. Sarah appreciated his honesty. I was definitely afraid at first. I'd had some medical problems, and I wasn't sure my body could handle regular exercise. Well, whatever you've been doing is working. You look strong and healthy now. The conversation with Jake highlighted something Sarah had been thinking about lately. Her journey back to health had been visible to others, even when she hadn't realized it. Marcus, the gym manager, had mentioned a few weeks earlier that she seemed like a completely different person from when she had first joined. Emma at work had commented on her improved energy and mood. Tom told her regularly that she seemed happier and more confident. Sarah was beginning to understand that her health crisis and recovery hadn't just been a private struggle. The people who cared about her had been affected too. That evening, Sarah and Tom were having dinner when he brought up something that had been on his mind. Can I ask you something that might be a little difficult? Tom said. Of course. Before you started taking care of your health, I was scared all the time. Scared that I would come home and find you collapsed, or get a call that you were in the hospital again. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She had been so focused on her own fear and pain that she hadn't fully considered what her health crises had put Tom through. I lived with this constant low-level anxiety that something terrible was going to happen, Tom continued. And I felt helpless because I couldn't force you to take care of yourself. I'm sorry, Sarah said quietly. I didn't realize how much my health problems were affecting you. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, Tom said quickly. I'm telling you because I want you to know how grateful I am for the changes you've made. It's such a relief to see you thriving instead of just surviving. The conversation made Sarah reflect on something Dr. Rodriguez had mentioned in therapy about the ripple effects of self-care. When you take care of yourself, you're not just helping yourself, Dr. Rodriguez had said. You're also helping everyone who loves you. Your health and well-being matter to other people. Sarah had spent so many years thinking that focusing on her health was selfish, but she was learning that the opposite was true. Taking care of herself was one of the most loving things she could do for the people in her life. "Thank you for being patient with me," Sarah told Tom. "I know it took me a long time to figure this out." "The important thing is that you did figure it out," Tom replied. "And now I get to watch you become the person you were always meant to be." That night, Sarah made a decision that had been building for weeks. She went to her jewelry box and took out the 5 hospital bracelets she had been keeping. She sat on the bed and looked at each one, remembering the circumstances that had led to it. The dehydration and malnutrition at 19. The stress-induced heart attack at 22. The allergic reaction from anxiety at 26. The blood sugar crash during wedding planning at 30. The bleeding ulcer 6 months ago. Each bracelet represented a time when she had pushed her body past its breaking point. But they also represented her body's remarkable ability to survive and recover. Sarah realized she no longer needed these reminders of how close she had come to dying. Instead, she wanted to focus on how fully she was now living. She gathered up the bracelets and walked to the kitchen, where Tom was cleaning up from dinner. "I want to throw these away," she said, showing him the collection. Tom looked at the bracelets, understanding immediately what they represented. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I don't need to carry those near-death experiences with me anymore. I'd rather focus on building health and strength." Together, they put the bracelets in the trash. It felt symbolic and freeing. "You know what I want to remember instead?" Sarah said. "What?" "The first time I completed a full hour at the gym without feeling exhausted. The day I deadlifted my own body weight. The morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about my health problems in weeks." Tom smiled. "Those are much better things to remember." The next week, Sarah had an experience that crystallized how much her perspective had changed. She was working with Lisa on some challenging exercises when she felt a twinge in her lower back. 6 months ago, any unusual sensation would have sent her into a panic, wondering if something was seriously wrong. Instead, Sarah simply stopped the exercise and mentioned the discomfort to Lisa. "Let's check your form," Lisa said, having Sarah demonstrate the movement again. "Ah, I see. You're rounding your back a little at the bottom. Let's adjust that." They corrected the form, and the discomfort disappeared immediately. "Good job listening to your body and speaking up," Lisa said. "That's exactly what you should do." Sarah realized this interaction represented everything that had changed in her relationship with her body. Instead of ignoring warning signals until they became emergencies, she was now attentive to subtle feedback and addressed issues early. Instead of pushing through pain out of fear or determination, she was learning to work with her body's natural responses. Instead of seeing every ache or discomfort as a sign of impending disaster, she was developing the ability to distinguish between normal muscle fatigue and genuine problems. "I think I'm finally learning to trust my body," Sarah told Lisa. "Your body has earned that trust," Lisa replied. "Look at how it's responded to good care. It's stronger and more resilient than ever." That afternoon, Sarah was cooling down from her workout when Patricia approached her again. "I wanted to thank you for encouraging me to start here," Patricia said. "It's been 3 weeks, and I already feel so much better." "That's wonderful," Sarah said. "How are you feeling about the exercise now?" "Much less scared. I'm starting to understand the difference between good exertion and dangerous strain." Sarah smiled, remembering when that distinction had seemed impossible to navigate. "My doctor says my resting heart rate has already improved," Patricia continued. "And I'm sleeping better than I have in months." Hearing about Patricia's progress reminded Sarah of something important. Her own journey from health crisis to strength hadn't just been about personal recovery. It had also given her the experience and perspective to help others facing similar challenges. "If you ever have questions or want a workout partner, let me know," Sarah offered. "Actually, there's something I've been wondering about," Patricia said. "Do you ever worry about relapsing? Like going back to old habits that got you into trouble?" The question was thoughtful and showed that Patricia was thinking seriously about long-term change, not just short-term fixes. I used to worry about that a lot, Sarah said honestly. But I've learned that the habits I'm building now are actually enjoyable and sustainable. I'm not forcing myself to do things I hate, I'm choosing things that make me feel good. It was true. Sarah no longer thought of her healthy lifestyle as a series of restrictions or obligations she had to maintain to avoid getting sick again. Instead, she thought of it as a collection of choices that enhanced her quality of life. Regular exercise gave her energy and confidence. Consistent sleep made her more creative and patient. Nutritious food helped her think clearly and feel steady throughout the day. The key is finding what works for you, Sarah continued. Not what you think you should do, but what actually makes your life better. As Sarah drove home that day, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in such a relatively short time. 6 months ago, she had been recovering from emergency surgery, weak and scared and uncertain whether she could ever feel truly healthy again. Now she was someone other people came to for fitness advice. She was setting new strength goals and achieving them. Most importantly, she was living with vitality and confidence instead of constant fear. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been easy. But it had been worth every moment of discomfort and uncertainty. Sarah realized that her 5 brushes with death had taught her something invaluable, how precious and resilient life could be. Each crisis had been a reminder not to take her health for granted. But now, instead of living in fear of the next crisis, she was living in appreciation of each healthy day. She thought about Patricia, just beginning her own journey back to health, and felt grateful to be in a position to offer encouragement and support. Sarah also thought about all the people at the gym who had supported her recovery, probably without realizing how much their kindness and acceptance had meant. Marcus had never made her feel foolish for starting slow. Lisa had guided her progress with patience and expertise. Jake had celebrated her consistency and shared his own struggles. The community aspect of recovery had been crucial. Sarah had spent so many years trying to handle everything alone, but healing had required accepting help and connection from others. As she pulled into her driveway, Sarah felt deeply grateful for the chain of events that had led her to this point. Even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, had been necessary for her growth. She was no longer the same person who had walked into that gym 6 months ago, fragile and uncertain. But she was also no longer defined by the 5 times she had almost died. Instead, she was defined by her choice to truly live. 1 year later, Sarah stood in front of a room full of people sharing her story for the first time. The support group for heart attack survivors had asked her to speak about her journey back to health, and she had finally felt ready to say yes. "A year and a half ago, I nearly died for the 5th time," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I was 32 years old, and I had spent my entire adult life treating my body like it was optional." The faces in the audience were familiar to her now. People who had survived heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and other serious health crises. People who understood the fear and uncertainty that came with starting over. "I kept those 5 hospital bracelets in my jewelry box like trophies," Sarah continued. "But they weren't trophies of survival, they were evidence that I had learned nothing from each close call." What the audience couldn't see was the journey that had brought Sarah to this moment of sharing her story publicly. 3 months ago, Dr. Chen had given her the news she had been hoping for but hadn't dared to expect. "Your latest scans show no signs of scar tissue from the ulcer," he had said. "Your digestive system has completely healed. From a medical standpoint, it's like the crisis never happened." Sarah had cried in his office, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. More importantly, Dr. Chen had continued, "Your overall health profile is excellent. Blood pressure, cholesterol, heart rate, stress markers, everything indicates that you're not just recovered, but actually healthier than you've been in years." The conversation had marked a turning point for Sarah. She was no longer a patient managing a health crisis. She was a healthy person who had learned how to stay that way. "The first time I walked into a gym," Sarah told the support group, "I was convinced everyone could tell I was broken. I felt like I had a sign on my forehead that said fragile, handle with care. A few people in the audience chuckled in recognition. But what I learned was that everyone there had their own story. The strongest-looking people often had overcome the biggest challenges. The gym wasn't a place for perfect people, it was a place for people who had decided to take care of themselves. Sarah had started speaking to support groups after Patricia suggested it. Patricia, who had become not just a workout partner but a close friend, had made remarkable progress in her own recovery. "You should share your experience," Patricia had said a few months ago. "There are so many people who feel hopeless after a health scare. They need to hear that it's possible to come back stronger." At first, Sarah had resisted the idea. Her journey felt too personal, too messy, to share with strangers. But Dr. Rodriguez had encouraged her to consider it. "Helping others can be a powerful part of healing," Dr. Rodriguez had explained. "It transforms your experience from something that happened to you into something that can benefit others." "The turning point for me," Sarah told the group, "wasn't when I stopped being scared. It was when I started being more curious about what my body could do than afraid of what might go wrong." The shift from fear to curiosity had been gradual but transformative. Instead of exercising to prevent another health crisis, Sarah had begun exercising to see how strong she could become. Instead of eating well to avoid getting sick, she had started choosing foods that gave her energy and made her feel vibrant. The motivation had shifted from negative to positive, and that change had made all the difference in her ability to maintain healthy habits long-term. 6 months ago, I competed in my first 5K race, Sarah shared. Not because I wanted to prove anything to anyone else, but because I was curious about what it would feel like to cross a finish line. The 5K had been Lisa's suggestion. "You're ready for a new challenge," Lisa had said. "Something that will show you how far you've come." Training for the race had been intimidating at first. Sarah had never been a runner, and the idea of running 3.1 miles straight had seemed impossible. But Lisa had helped her build up gradually, mixing running intervals with walking until Sarah could complete the full distance comfortably. The day of the race, Sarah had been nervous but excited. Tom, Patricia, Jake, and even Marcus from the gym had come to cheer her on. "I finished in the middle of the pack," Sarah told the support group. "But crossing that finish line felt like the biggest victory of my life. Not because I had won anything, but because I had proven to myself that my body was capable of way more than I had ever imagined." The race had been a celebration of everything Sarah had rebuilt. Her cardiovascular health, her muscle strength, her mental resilience, and, most importantly, her trust in her body's ability to handle challenges. But the real victory, Sarah continued, wasn't the race itself. It was everything that led up to it. Showing up at the gym when I was scared. Learning to eat foods that nourished me instead of just filled me up. Getting enough sleep even when I felt busy. Asking for help when I needed it. After her presentation, several people approached Sarah with questions and their own stories. An older man named Robert shared that he had been afraid to exercise since his heart attack 6 months earlier. "My doctor says it's safe, but I can't shake the feeling that physical activity is what caused the problem in the first place." Sarah understood the confusion completely. "I had the same fear," she told him. "But what I learned was that it wasn't activity that had caused my problems, it was the complete lack of consistent, moderate activity combined with chronic stress and poor self-care." A woman named Janet talked about her struggle with changing eating habits after a stroke. "I know what I should eat," she said, "but when I'm stressed, I still reach for junk food." "How did you break that pattern?" "It took time and practice," Sarah answered honestly. "The key for me was having healthy options readily available and learning other ways to manage stress. Exercise became my new stress reliever instead of food." The conversations reminded Sarah of how complex the journey back to health could be. It wasn't just about following doctors' orders or adopting new habits. It was about fundamentally changing your relationship with your body and your concept of self-care. A younger woman named Crystal approached Sarah as the group was ending. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said quietly. "Of course. Do you ever feel angry about the years you lost to poor health? Like, do you wish you had figured this out sooner?" The question touched on something Sarah had worked through in therapy. For a while, she had been angry about the time she felt she had wasted being sick and scared. "I used to feel that way," Sarah said. "But now I think those experiences were necessary for me to appreciate what I have now. I don't think I would have valued my health as much if I hadn't almost lost it." It was true. Sarah's gratitude for her current vitality was deepened by her memory of what it felt like to be constantly worried about her body. The contrast made every healthy day feel like a gift. Besides, Sarah added, "I'm 33 now. Even if I had started taking care of myself at 19, that's only 14 years I missed. I potentially have 40 or 50 more years to live well. The past doesn't have to determine the future." Crystal smiled, looking encouraged by the perspective. As Sarah drove home from the support group meeting, she reflected on how much her understanding of health had evolved. 18 months ago, health had seemed like something external that happened to her, either good or bad, largely outside her control. Now she understood that health was something she actively created through daily choices. Not perfect choices, but consistent ones that honored her body's needs and supported her long-term well-being. The shift from passive to active had been empowering. Instead of feeling like a victim of her body's failures, Sarah felt like a partner in its success. At home, Tom was waiting with dinner prepared and the table set. It was a Thursday evening ritual they had developed. Whoever got home first started cooking. "How did the presentation go?" he asked. "Really well. Scary at first, but good. Several people asked for my contact information to continue the conversation." "I'm proud of you for sharing your story," Tom said. "I know that wasn't easy." Sarah appreciated Tom's support throughout her health journey. He had never pressured her to change, but he had consistently supported her efforts and celebrated her progress. "It felt good to be helpful," Sarah said. "To know that my experience might encourage someone else to take better care of themselves." Over dinner, they talked about the weekend plans. Saturday was Sarah's long workout day, followed by meal prep for the week. Sunday they were planning a hiking trip with Patricia and her husband. The routine they had built together was sustainable and enjoyable, not rigid or punishing. Sarah had learned that the key to lasting change was finding ways to care for her health that enhanced her life rather than restricting it. "I have something to tell you," Tom said as they finished eating. Sarah looked at him curiously. "I've been inspired by your health journey, and I've decided to start taking better care of myself too. I joined the gym today." Sarah felt a rush of happiness. Not because she had been pushing Tom to change, but because she could see how her own transformation had created positive ripples in their relationship. "That's wonderful," she said. "What made you decide to start now? Watching you become so strong and confident has made me realize I want that for myself too. And I want to make sure I'm healthy enough to keep up with you for the next 50 years. The conversation highlighted something Dr. Rodriguez had mentioned about the social aspects of health changes. When one person in a relationship started taking better care of themselves, it often inspired positive changes in others. Sarah's journey hadn't just healed her own relationship with her body, it had strengthened her marriage and given her the ability to support others facing similar challenges. That night, as Sarah was getting ready for bed, she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the person who had walked into the gym 18 months earlier. The physical changes were obvious. She was leaner, more toned, and stood with better posture. But the deeper changes were even more significant. Her eyes held confidence instead of fear. Her movements were fluid and sure instead of hesitant. Most importantly, she looked like someone who was comfortable in her own skin. Sarah remembered the 5 hospital bracelets she had thrown away months earlier. She no longer needed reminders of her near-death experiences because she had internalized their lessons. She had learned that her body was resilient and capable of remarkable recovery when given proper care. She had discovered that taking care of herself wasn't selfish, it was essential for being able to care for others. She had realized that health wasn't something that happened to her, but something she actively created through her choices. Most importantly, she had learned to see her body as an ally rather than an adversary. As Sarah settled into bed next to Tom, she felt deeply grateful for the journey that had brought her to this point. Even the painful parts had been necessary for her growth. She thought about the support group members she had met that evening, each beginning their own journey back to health after a crisis. Some of them seemed hopeful and determined. Others appeared overwhelmed and scared. Sarah remembered being in both states at different times during her recovery. The key had been to keep taking small, consistent steps forward even when the destination seemed unclear. Tomorrow she would go to the gym, not because she had to, but because she enjoyed it. She would prepare nutritious food, not out of fear of getting sick, but because it made her feel energetic and clear thinking. She would continue building the life she had almost lost 5 times, now understanding how precious and fragile and resilient it was. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah smiled thinking about the person she had become. Not perfect, but healthy. Not fearless, but brave. Not invulnerable, but strong. She had learned that surviving wasn't enough, she wanted to thrive. And, now, finally, she was. The woman who had almost died 5 times had become the woman who was truly alive.